It was a breezy Friday afternoon in the heart of the city, and the boutique on Lexington Avenue was alive with soft music and murmurs of casual shoppers. Among the polished shelves and designer displays, a young black woman named Dr. Maya Carter quietly browsed. She wore a tailored cream blazer over a silk blouse, her hair pulled into a clean bun. Every movement was precise, calm, purposeful. After selecting a pair of designer heels and a minimalist gold necklace, she approached the register, card in hand. The owner, a sharp-dressed white man in his 50s named Gerald, gave her a forced smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Will this be all?" he asked, glancing at her choices with mild surprise. Maya nodded, offering her platinum credit card without hesitation. Gerald took it, but instead of swiping it, he held it up between his fingers and narrowed his eyes. "Is this yours?" he asked pointedly, suspicion dripping from his voice. Maya raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" Gerald tilted his head. "It's just. We've had some issues with stolen cards lately. You don't look like the type who usually shops here." The words landed heavy, sharp. A few other customers nearby turned to glance, suddenly aware of the tension. Maya's jaw tightened. "That card has my name on it. I'd like to complete my purchase." But Gerald wasn't listening. He walked away from the register, still holding her card, and motioned for the security guard. "I'm going to have to verify this," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. The security guard, a younger man who had been leaning near the door, straightened up and approached. "Problem?" he asked. Gerald nodded toward Maya. "Might be a fake card. You know how it is." Maya stood still, her posture composed but her eyes burning. "I'm a cardiothoracic surgeon," she said quietly. "That card pays for operating room equipment and international research travel. I suggest you return it before you humiliate yourself further." Gerald scoffed. "Right," he said sarcastically. "And I'm the mayor." As the seconds passed, Maya said nothing else. She didn't argue. She didn't plead. She simply turned her head to the large glass windows that faced the street, and there it was. The new billboard that had gone up that morning, towering just across the road. It was part of the city's Faces of Healthcare Heroes campaign. On it, a massive photo of Maya looked back at the store. In full scrubs, surgical mask pulled below her chin, arms folded, the text beneath her read, "Dr. Maya Carter, lead cardiac surgeon, saving lives, breaking barriers." The security guard turned, saw it, and blinked. Gerald followed his gaze. And froze. For a moment, time inside the boutique seemed to stop. Gerald's hand loosened around the credit card as his eyes locked on the massive billboard across the street. The resemblance was unmistakable. The woman in front of him and the towering image outside were one and the same. His face turned a deep shade of red, not from embarrassment alone, but from the sudden, crushing weight of realization. The customers who had paused earlier now whispered audibly, turning their heads toward the window, confirming the truth without a word. The silence was no longer comfortable, but sharp and condemning. Maya didn't need to say anything. Her poise, her silence, and the evidence looming high above the sidewalk said everything for her. She reached forward slowly and took back her card from Gerald's trembling hand, her eyes never leaving his. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady but razor-sharp. "I think I'll take my business elsewhere." Gerald opened his mouth, perhaps to apologize or explain, but no words came out. His authority, so confident just minutes earlier, had dissolved into shame. As she turned to leave, the security guard stepped back without a word, holding the door open for her like a gentleman. Maya walked out into the city light, not with anger, but with dignity. Outside, a few people had begun to gather, looking up at the billboard, then back at her. A couple even clapped lightly, recognizing her from the city's campaign. One woman whispered to her child, "That's her, the doctor who saved all those lives during the blackout surgery." Back inside, Gerald stood frozen, still staring out the window. The music continued to play softly in the background, absurdly cheerful against the weight of his humiliation. The boutique, once his controlled kingdom, now felt like a courtroom. A customer placed her items back on the counter and quietly walked out, no longer willing to spend her money under that roof. Another followed. Gerald's staff exchanged looks, unsure whether to speak, but clearly aware that the damage was done. Meanwhile, Maya didn't look back. She walked down the street, head high, each step a quiet reminder that no matter how polished a store or proud a man, respect is earned, not presumed, and assumptions based on race could collapse in an instant when confronted by truth 10 feet tall. Later that evening, the story had already begun to ripple beyond the boutique's walls. A passerby had recorded the last few moments, Maya walking out in silence, the billboard towering behind her, Gerald standing frozen inside the store, and posted it on social media with the caption, "When you accuse the wrong one." Within hours, it had gone viral. News outlets picked up the story almost immediately, framing it as another example of the quiet, everyday racism that too many professionals still face. But this time, the narrative wasn't just about humiliation, it was about dignity, exposure, and poetic justice. Maya, unaware of the video at first, had gone on with her day. She returned to the hospital, changed out of her blazer and into her scrubs, and was in the OR by early evening. Her patient was a 6-year-old boy with a heart defect, and as she scrubbed in, her mind was entirely focused on the procedure. The weight of what had happened earlier had not disappeared, it had simply been folded into a deeper part of her, the same part that had driven her through medical school, through years of being underestimated, through every microaggression delivered with a smile. As she finished the surgery successfully and left the recovery room, she checked her phone for the first time since stepping into the hospital. Dozens of missed messages. Friends, colleagues, media inquiries, and even a message from the city's mayor's office thanking her for her service and apologizing for what had occurred. But Maya scrolled past most of them, stopping only when she saw a text from her father, saw the video. Proud doesn't even begin to cover it. Meanwhile, back at the boutique, Gerald sat in his office, the blinds drawn. The store was nearly empty, his usual clientele seemingly vanished overnight. The video had sparked an outpouring of criticism, calls for boycott, and even threats to his business license. And the worst part wasn't even the backlash. It was the truth of it. Watching himself on camera, eyes narrowed, voice raised, assuming the worst of someone who looked like Maya, it was a mirror he couldn't look away from. His wife had called him twice, not to comfort him, but to ask, "What were you thinking?" He wasn't thinking. That was the problem. Back in her apartment, Maya sat on her couch, finally letting her body relax. She looked out the window at the same billboard, still glowing softly in the night. She didn't feel victorious, only visible. Seen, at last, in the way she truly was, not through fear or suspicion, but through facts, accomplishments, and purpose. And this time, the whole city saw it too. The following morning, the sun rose on a city that now knew Dr. Maya Carter by name. Across social media, hashtags like #DrCarter, #BillboardJustice, and #RespectBlackProfessionals were trending. Interviews from past patients surfaced, filled with praise and personal stories about how Maya had saved lives, mentored underprivileged youth, and spoken at free clinics. News anchors called her a symbol of excellence in the face of prejudice, and her name was now synonymous with quiet strength. Meanwhile, Gerald's boutique wasn't faring so well. His Yelp page was bombarded with one-star reviews, most from people who had never stepped foot in his store, but their anger was loud, collective, and relentless. Protesters gathered outside with signs that read, "We shop with respect and your bias is showing." Gerald tried to step out the back entrance, wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap, but someone recognized him immediately and shouted, "Hey, it's the fake card guy." He ducked back inside, ashamed and overwhelmed. At the same time, Maya was seated at a cafe not far from the hospital, trying to enjoy a quiet moment before her rounds. But she couldn't. People were approaching her, gently, respectfully, asking to shake her hand, thanking her for standing with grace. A young black girl about 10 years old came up shyly with her mother and said, "I want to be a surgeon like you." Maya knelt down, smiled, and said, "You already have what it takes." Later that day, the hospital's PR department asked Maya if she wanted to speak publicly about the incident. A press conference. A formal statement. Maybe even an op-ed in the Times. But she declined all of it. "I didn't do anything special," she told them. "I didn't confront him. I didn't yell. I just existed." That was enough for people to assume the worst. And now, maybe they'll think twice. Meanwhile, Gerald was trying to craft his own statement. He considered blaming stress, confusion, store policy. But each excuse felt hollow, because deep down, he knew the truth. He had looked at a confident, well-dressed black woman and assumed she didn't belong. That she was pretending. That she was a fraud. And in doing so, he exposed himself instead. His wife stopped by the store that afternoon and handed him a folder. "Lawyer says we should settle if she sues." Quietly. Generously. Gerald just nodded, too ashamed to speak. That night, as Maya walked past the billboard again, she saw that someone had placed a small bouquet of flowers beneath it. No note, no signature, just a quiet acknowledgement. She smiled and kept walking, not because she needed the validation, but because for the first time in a long time, she felt like the city was walking with her. The ripple effects of that day continued far beyond the boutique and beyond Maya's personal life. Local news had picked up her story, but now national media outlets were calling. Her assistant at the hospital joked that they needed a second phone line just to handle press inquiries. Maya still declined most interviews, but the hospital's board saw an opportunity. They invited her to be the keynote speaker at their upcoming gala fundraiser, not just as a doctor, but as a voice for equity in medicine and beyond. She hesitated at first. Maya wasn't used to the spotlight, at least not outside the operating room. Her brilliance had always been in the work, not the fame. But after speaking with a former patient, a teenage boy who told her, "People need to see doctors who look like you," she agreed. While Maya's star rose, Gerald's world narrowed. Each day brought more cancellations, returns, and silence. Regular clients vanished. 2 employees quit without notice. And then, one morning, he received an envelope, not from a lawyer, but from the city's Small Business Council. His boutique had been a preferred partner for upscale retail events, but the letter made it clear, his partnership was being reconsidered in light of recent conduct misaligned with community values. He was being quietly removed, the kind of exile money couldn't fight. Unable to ignore the consequences any longer, Gerald decided to write a letter. A real one. Not a PR statement, not an email drafted by an attorney, but a handwritten apology to Maya. He didn't expect forgiveness. He didn't expect a response. He just needed to do something that didn't feel performative. He began, "Dr. Carter, I write this with deep regret." Meanwhile, Maya sat at her desk, reviewing patient charts. The media attention hadn't changed her schedule. Her pager still beeped. Her patients still needed her. But her hospital had changed, subtly, but unmistakably. She noticed that younger black staff walked a little taller. White colleagues asked questions more carefully, listened more openly. Even the boardroom, once so stiff and predictable, now buzzed with a different kind of energy, possibility. That evening, as she left work, a maintenance worker waved to her. "Dr. Carter." He called. "You were a real one." She smiled, paused, and waved back. It wasn't about the billboard anymore. It was about what it had uncovered. What it had taught people. And what it had reminded her, that her presence, her patience, her refusal to shrink, was already a form of resistance. And across the city, people remembered her name not because she fought back, but because she didn't have to. The truth did it for her. The gala arrived on a crisp Saturday night, hosted at one of the city's most prestigious venues. A red carpet lined the marble staircase, and the ballroom glowed with gold light and delicate string music. Maya stood backstage in a navy evening gown, her hospital badge tucked discreetly in her clutch, not out of habit, but symbolism. No one would question who she was tonight. The mayor was in attendance. So were donors, executives, and prominent figures in health and education. As the MC called her name, the crowd rose to their feet, a standing ovation before she had even spoken. Maya stepped onto the stage calmly, meeting the eyes of hundreds of people, each waiting for her to speak. She didn't read from notes. Instead, she told a story. She talked about growing up watching her mother clean houses she'd never be allowed to live in. About her first anatomy class, where she was the only black woman in a room of 50. About being mistaken for a nurse, then a secretary, then an assistant, never the surgeon she had become. And then, gently but clearly, she told the story of what had happened at the boutique. She didn't name Gerald. She didn't have to. The audience knew. Instead, she spoke about assumptions, how dangerous and small they were. "The question," she said, "is not why I was doubted. The question is, how many people are never believed because someone didn't stop to see their humanity." The applause was thunderous. It wasn't just for her words, it was for her composure, her clarity, her undeniable strength. Afterward, dozens lined up just to thank her, shake her hand, take a picture. But Maya noticed something else too, that the black and brown guests in the crowd had tears in their eyes, nodding as if she had said the words they'd carried silently for years. Across town, Gerald watched the speech alone in his dimly lit office. A live stream link had been shared on social media, and he'd hesitated to click, but in the end, he did. He watched her walk with grace, speak with power, and never once humiliate him, even though he'd humiliated her. And when the camera briefly panned to the billboard outside the venue, still bearing her image, Gerald finally understood, she had been bigger than that store the entire time. His handwritten apology still sat in an envelope on his desk, unmailed. He looked at it now and realized it wasn't enough. Not anymore. Weeks passed, but the ripple effect of that single moment in the boutique continued to grow. Dr. Maya Carter had quietly returned to her normal schedule: morning rounds, patient consults, teaching med students, late-night emergency surgeries, but the world around her had shifted. The hospital launched a new mentorship program in her name, pairing young students of color with medical professionals to nurture their ambitions early. Her image remained on the billboard, but now there were new ones too, featuring her colleagues, her students, and the message, "Excellence looks like all of us." One morning, Maya arrived at work and found a package waiting on her desk. No sender listed. Inside was a simple envelope and a leather-bound notebook. She opened the note. It was the handwritten letter, the one Gerald had penned and rewritten a dozen times. This time, it was delivered. The letter was humble. There were no excuses, no corporate polish. Just words written in uneven script. "You showed me who I really was, not with anger, but with dignity. I can't take back what I did, but I want you to know I see it now. And I'm changing my store, my hiring practices, and myself. Not because I got caught, but because I finally looked in the mirror." You held it up without ever raising your voice. Maya read it once, then again. She didn't feel joy or triumph. Just a quiet sense of completion. The real win wasn't in the viral video, the public praise, or even the speech. It was in this, the shift that happened behind closed doors, in a man who had once seen her as a threat and now saw her as a teacher. That evening, as she walked home, Maya passed the boutique. The windows had been redesigned. The mannequins now wore clothes from local black designers. A sign at the entrance read, "Everyone belongs here." She didn't go inside. She didn't need to. She just smiled faintly, tucked her hands in her coat, and kept walking. Across the street, a mother and daughter stood looking up at the billboard of Maya. The little girl asked, "Mom, is she a movie star?" The mother shook her head with pride. "No, baby," she said. "She's something even better. She's real." And in that quiet moment, as the city lights flickered on and the streets hummed with life, it was clear that this story, born of doubt, transformed by truth, had become more than just an incident. It was now a symbol. A lesson. A legacy.